Well, at Easter time, people are remembering the incredible news that Jesus Christ is risen. He's alive. He's come back from the dead. Christians all over the world will be celebrating this idea that Jesus is alive. But many of us looking on will be asking this question, why? Why do you believe this? How can you believe something such as a resurrection? Resurrections don't happen. Miracles don't happen. How can we believe this resurrection? Well, there's a few things that we can say in response to that. And I've taken a few evidences based on the research of others much cleverer than I am. And I've put them together for us. But I would love you to go and investigate for yourself. The evidence is great, and many a skeptic has turned from not believing in the resurrection to believing as they've investigated the historical evidence. Now, the first reason, and all of these reasons begin with E, again taken from other people much cleverer than me. And the first reason is the execution of Jesus. You see, many people will say Jesus didn't rise from the dead because he probably didn't die. Maybe he survived the crucifixion. Now, the reality that we need to know about crucifixion is that the Romans were experts. They knew how to kill people. And the reality that Jesus would have survived this crucifixion was basically none. And then in the case of Jesus, well, what happened to him? What we see in the historical records, he was pierced in his side, blood and water poured out. That water, the fluid from around the heart, because of the severe stress that he would have been under. We know that medically now, and it's recorded there. Jesus was definitely dead. The second evidence that people look to support the idea of the resurrection is the early records. You see, it's easy to think, isn't it, that over time this story of Jesus has developed, and Chinese whispers, and then before you know it, you get to the point where people believe that he rose from the dead. And back then he just came out of a house, but now 2,000 years later he rose from the dead. The story has developed. Well, the reality is, wonderfully, we have really early records showing us that people back there and then at the time, very shortly after the time, believed in the resurrection of Jesus. It was a widely spread belief. It wasn't a myth that had developed over the years. Here's one of those early records written by a guy called the Apostle Paul, an early convert to Christianity, someone who hated Christianity but became a Christian. He said this, "For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Peter and then to the 12. And after that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers at the same time." You see, this information that we have here was passed on to Paul. It was something that he received, and it was something, therefore, that was believed very early on after the death of Jesus, that there had been a resurrection. This was not mythology, but whatever happened, people really believed there had been a resurrection. The third evidence that people might look to is the reality of the empty tomb. You see, there's been many ideas about what happened to Jesus after his death. Things that might have looked like a resurrection. But as you work through all of the different explanations, we find that the simple reality and the most reasonable thing to believe is that Jesus really is alive, that he really came back to life. It's interesting that Jesus was put in a tomb near to Jerusalem, the very place that he died, the place where people saw the tomb, the place where people could have easily checked out, the place where, if this was a lie, the lie wouldn't have lasted. It's also interesting that people didn't have a reason to steal the body. The disciples, who were scared and fearful, and half of them cleared off after Jesus' death because of the pressure they were under, they didn't have the means, the motive, the opportunity to steal the body. As some people have said, the Jews certainly didn't want to steal the body. They wanted this Jesus dead. They wanted the story ended. They wanted to show people, here is your king dead. He's no more. He's not who you thought he was. And the Romans certainly didn't want this cult, this idea of Jesus, to spread any further. They were happy with a dead Jesus and no more trouble from the Jews, or these Christians as they would later be known. So the tomb was empty. The Roman guard was placed there. The reality of Jesus' body being stolen or any of the other ideas are so slim, and there's much more that we can say about that as you investigate the resurrection. But lastly, the last reason for believing in the resurrection. We've had the execution. Jesus was really dead. We've had the early records. This is not mythology. We've had the empty tomb, the reality that Jesus really was dead. Really had come out of the tomb. But the last one is the eyewitnesses of Jesus. Incredibly, at least, and we know this from the early records, at least 515 people saw Jesus after his resurrection, probably many more than that. People who saw Jesus, who ate with Jesus, who touched Jesus, who spoke with Jesus. Some of them skeptics, like many of us, who turned and believed and realised that this was true. It's fascinating that some of those early eyewitnesses would have been quite embarrassing eyewitnesses. Some of those eyewitnesses were women, and they were the first people recorded to go and see Jesus. Now, why do I say that's embarrassing? We trust women today, but in the first century, in Jewish culture and in Roman culture, no one would have trusted women. And yet it is recorded here in these records that the women saw Jesus first. How fascinating. If this story was really a lie, and then those details wouldn't have been included. So there's 4 reasons to believe in the resurrection that you can go and check out and investigate, and there's much more to say about these things. The execution, the early records, the empty tomb, and the eyewitnesses of Jesus who went on to be willing to suffer and even die in many cases for what they knew was not a lie. It's very powerful, and ultimately the resurrection is something so wonderful. It is such good news for Christians that we'd love many people to come and check it out and find out more.